This person was here and he definitely shot. I don't know why he did what he did.
A gunman opening fire on a busy street in Toronto overnight, killing one person and injuring 13 others. And terrorism has not been ruled out.
The level of corruption and wealth among Iranian leaders shows that Iran is run by something that resembles the mafia more than a government.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo taking aim at Iran at a speech in California.
The president has been tweeting because we've been hearing from the leader of Iran, and it's not good news.
The Iranian President Rouhani: never ever threaten the United States again, or you will suffer consequences, the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before.
The FBI unveiling hundreds of pages of redacted documents this weekend on the wiretapping of Carter Page.
You're talking about misleading the courts. I've never been an agent of the foreign power by any stretch of the imagination.
This is about Carter Page, this in theory, but when you look at what's been released, it was all about getting at the Trump campaign.
Carter Page is more like Inspector Gadget than he is Jason Bourne or James Bond.
Is it from that car?
I thought it was fireworks at first because it was a rapid fire. More people were running, and so we started running, and we ran down a side street.
All right, so let's get right to a Fox News alert. One person is dead, 13 others are injured after a gunman opened fire on a busy street in Toronto. Terrorism has not been ruled out.
The shooter, dressed in all black, opening fire with a handgun in the neighborhood known as Greektown. A young woman dead, a 9-year-old girl in critical condition right now.
The gunman killed in a shootout with cops. Investigators say this was not a random act, but it is too early to tell if it was terror. Also, apparently the Toronto mayor told reporters in Canada, Toronto has a gun problem. All right, we'll keep you posted on that. In the meantime, let's bring in Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary. You remember him. He was on TV every afternoon. Ticket incoming. Now he's written a great book. It is called The Briefing, available wherever you buy books.
That's true. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Excited.
We went to your hometown. We sat down with your mom and your wife and you in the house that you grew up in. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But first, because you're on the curvy couch.
Yeah.
And we have an opportunity to talk to you about some news of the day that you used to talk about regularly. You're familiar with the story about Iran.
Yeah.
So the president of Iran warns our president, if you get involved, if there's any hostility, then this is what's going to happen. And he says, Mr. Trump, don't play with the lion's tail. This would only lead to regret. America should know that peace with Iran is the mother of all peace, and war with Iran is the mother of all wars. And then our president responded.
He did respond on Twitter in all caps. That means he's yelling at President Rouhani. He says, never ever threaten the United States again, or you will suffer consequences the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. We are no longer a country that's a swipe at Barack Obama that will stand for your demented words of violence and death. Be cautious. Why did the president put that out this particular weekend?
Well, I think if you're President Rouhani, you better be very clear that you know who you're dealing with. And President Trump made it very clear that this country, under this leadership, is not going to stand for that kind of threatening language. And so I think that he better heed those words.
So, in other words, it might have worked with the last guy who had this job, but not
all I'll say is that I would not mess with President Trump. He means what he says, and he takes very decisive action. And so if you're President Rouhani, you better get your team together real quick and redo your talking points.
So you don't anticipate a pallet of cash going to the
no, there'll be no pallets of cash. There might be things going to Iran, but they're not going to have cash on them.
More like a withdrawal from the nuclear deal. Well, you are someone who knows. You know the president very well. We sat down with you in your hometown to talk about your new book called The Briefing. I read it cover to cover. Here's our interview with you and your mom and your wife.
Thank you.
So this is the family room. This is where we would gather as a family to watch television, to talk. You know, obviously there's a lot of pictures of family in here. The photo up there when I was a kid, this is me in ninth grade. That's the only picture that still exists from that era.
You wanted us to come here to Rhode Island.
Yeah.
This is where you grew up.
It is.
Why did you want the interview to take place here?
Because it is a special place for me and my family, and I wanted a platform and opportunity to kind of give a little more context to who I am beyond a podium.
I see your humble beginnings and your close-knit family. So many of us can relate to that. And your father has pancreatic cancer. He passed away?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Your dad was your hero. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about your dad.
He instilled a sense of right and wrong, family, faith. So I would have never gotten where I am today without his guidance and support.
I know your faith is extremely important to you. How even your hardest days, when your dad dies, how God just redeems. When you have a tough time and you're in the valley, all of a sudden you're on the mountain. Your dad passes away, and then you get this big job in Washington, almost like your dad or God saying, it's going to be okay, I've got you. On election night, you ended up winning. What was that night like?
I don't know that I'll ever be able to fully explain what that felt like. You're walking on cloud nine in a way that I don't think I can ever fully articulate, nor do I know if it'll happen again.
Tell us about day one.
Good evening. Thank you guys for coming. We had planned that Monday to be our day one. And the next thing you know, I'm talking about, inauguration sizes and having people tear apart my suit. And, it was definitely baptism by fire.
So, Mom, tell us what it was like to raise this amazing child.
Oh, come on now. It was good. It was challenging at times. Sean's always been focused. Of all the kids I could always read Sean, I knew when he was having a difficult time that day, and I was prepared for whatever was going to come the way as far as news and criticism.
You talk about the press. You said it's a game of gotcha.
Right. I think that there's a difference between reporters and stories that intentionally are false and painting everyone with a broad brush. There are some good reporters, but there are others who I think would rather engage in trying to figure out how to get a clip or a click than good old-fashioned journalism.
What's the New York Times?
That's when Rebecca and I got married. Rebecca was in the news business. I was on Capitol Hill, and we got lucky.
Rebecca, what's it like to be married to someone who sometimes is under scrutiny? I mean, this administration has just been pummeled by what he would call fake news. You saw Sean being made fun of on Saturday Night Live or being impersonated. And what was that like?
Sometimes it's funny, but I think it's also just digging into your roots and knowing your reality and knowing who he is, knowing who we are as a family.
The number one question that everyone asks you write about this in the book. You say, can I ask you a question, Sean? You already know what they're going to ask. What is it?
It's mostly about Melissa McCarthy. I'm watching this thing going, oh my gosh, that's me.
Did you have a sense of humor about it? Because it was, if you can take the politics out of it, it was funny.
She's a fantastic actor. I thought it was funny. The end of it and a couple of the other skits I think went over the line a little bit, but as an actor, she does a fantastic job, and there were some definitely humorous points.
You start the book and you end the book with Anthony Scaramucci. Yeah. He's brought in, and that leads to your resignation.
Correct.
Why is that?
I didn't think he had the skill set for that. And the president wanted a change. And I told the president, look, I respect that you want to change, and if you're going to do it, let's give Anthony the ability to do it and make it his.
So, are you glad he's out?
I see a big difference in just the look on his face, and I mean the day after, you could just see it. It all drained out, and it was Sean again.
Do you miss it?
I miss the people tremendously.
That's what everyone says.
No, it is.
That means no, right?
No, I don't. No, I don't miss the job. I was honored to have it. There's a level of intensity, and I write about so many instances in the book that whether it's me or my family, that I was glad to walk away from that level of scrutiny and intensity.
Yeah, you've really worked hard.
Thank you.
Interview, Ainsley. Nice of you to go up there.
Just cool, the guy who was raised in the smallest state in our country has one of the biggest jobs, and that's the American dream. Congratulations on your success.
That's what I write about, is how you end up there.
Let's talk a little bit more about the book. Is there, without trying to kill your book sales here, is there one key story that nobody would believe from your time in the White House? Just one. I'm looking for just one. We have limited. We got to go to Jillian for headlines at some point.
We're going to start getting into prime time. I think there's a bunch of them. As Ainsley pointed out, that every piece of this. I grew up in a small town in a small state in a very tight-knit family. The idea that I ended up at the White House. So every piece of this, you saw the pictures there, meeting the Holy Father, standing behind the podium, having these interactions with the President of the United States and flying on Air Force One with him and meeting foreign leaders. Every single day was sort of one of those pinch me moments where you're going, there's no way I deserve to be here. And that's why I continuously say what an honor and a privilege it's been.
How about the one time you told the President no?
I've never told the president no. I've given him advice and counsel.
No, the church thing.
Oh, that's yeah. Well, that's different. The president was very kind one time in Bedminster. We were up there during the transition, and he said, "You know, let's all go to church tomorrow." And it was a very kind offer for him to try to bring the team together. And I said, "I have to go to mass tomorrow because I'm Catholic, and I had already prearranged the schedule to make sure I could go in the morning before he started his meetings." And he had made this very kind offer to bring. He said, "Let's all go together tomorrow." And I thought, how do you tell the president-elect no when he's making this very kind gesture? But I had to fulfill my obligation. So I was wondering, like, how do you explain this to the soon-to-be leader of the free world?
How do you do that? You were there from day one in the White House. Yeah. You talked to the press every day. They had all sorts of interesting questions for you. Fast forward to today. Has the tenor changed? I mean, the last week over Helsinki and earlier about a month ago regarding the kids in the cages. I mean, it's been ferocious.
I don't know that. In fact, I would argue that it's intensified. There is this. God bless Sarah and that team for how they can continuously go do this every day. But the president, I think, whether it's the campaign, the transition, or now, has constantly been under attack. And it's the beautiful thing about it, and I think you guys saw it before in this NBC News poll, it continues to tick up. The American people are hip to this idea that results matter, and they're seeing the president get things done for them on behalf of this economy, on behalf of immigration, ISIS, foreign policy. This president's doing exactly what he said he was going to do as a candidate, and he's getting results for the American people, and people are rewarding him in terms of their approval rating.
Well, Sarah's going to... Yeah. Well, you were instrumental in getting Sarah trained and getting her prepared for this position. So I know you told the president you thought she would be good for the position.
I don't think I needed to tell them. Obviously, I fully support her, but I didn't need to tell anybody that. She has demonstrated that day in and day out what a talented individual she is.
And she's going to be joining us in about 20 minutes.
All right. Sean's book, if you want all the stories behind the scenes, it's called The Briefing.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming up to Rhode Island.
You're welcome. It was an honor to have you guys. My pleasure. And thanks for the gift basket full of all kinds of booze. Rhode Island, we loved it.
Where's our booze?
We distributed it amongst the crew.
You didn't come. You didn't come. No booze.
You lose. Congratulations.
Right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Meanwhile, straight ahead, this Monday afternoon, the Senate will vote on confirming President Trump's pick to lead the VA. So what do you need to know about Robert Wilkie? We're going to talk to, we're taking you inside next.
Plus, Andy McCarthy says those new FISA documents prove what he's been saying for the last year, and he's going to join us live.
And Nancy Pelosi, remember her, promises if she gets enough people to sign a petition, she'll stop Vladimir Putin from visiting the U.S. But there's just one tiny little itsy-bitsy problem with her plan. We'll tell you what it is when Fox and Friends returns on a rainy Monday morning. Later today, the Senate expected to vote on the confirmation of Secretary of Veterans Affairs nominee Robert Wilkie. The vote comes just days after Wilkie received near unanimous backing from the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. So, what else should we know about this nominee? Joining us now to discuss, Dan Caldwell of Concerned Veterans for America. Dan, thanks so much for getting up and being here with us. What should we know about Robert Wilkie?
Well, I think, first of all, President Trump made an excellent choice in selecting Robert Wilkie to be his next VA secretary. To quote Secretary Mattis, Robert Wilkie was born in khaki diapers. He grew up in a military family. His father was actually severely wounded during the invasion of Cambodia, so he has a personal stake in caring for our wounded warriors. He's also a veteran himself. He served in the Air Force and Navy, and he spent most of his life working in veterans and defense policy. So I can't think of a better choice for the next VA secretary, and I'm looking forward to him being confirmed.
Dan, you also haven't heard a lot from Dems talking about Robert Wilkie like they did Ronnie Jackson. Is that a sign to you that this is really going to breeze through the Senate with no problems, or are we going to have problems because the Democrats in the Senate always create problems for Trump nominees?
Well, I do think that Robert Wilkie is going to be easily confirmed, but I do think, unfortunately, he'll be the first VA Secretary nominee to not receive a unanimous vote. And that's not a reflection of Robert Wilkie. That's because you're going to have people like Bernie Sanders who want to play political games around this. He's already said that he won't support Robert Wilkie. He voted against him in committee, not because he doesn't like Robert Wilkie, but because he's trying to make a political statement against President Trump, and that's really unfortunate.
If he is confirmed, what in your estimation does he need to do to turn the VA around?
Well, I think it's important to point out that over the last year and a half, President Trump has been able to pass a lot of laws that languished under the previous administration. Laws that fix the GI Bill, that increase choice for veterans, that make it easier to fire bad VA employees. But all these laws need to be properly implemented, and unfortunately the swamp at the VA is fighting back against them. So Robert Wilkie is going to need to get in there and ensure that all these great bills that President Trump has signed into law are properly implemented and executed, so the VA can better care for our veterans.
Dan, we will eagerly await the vote. Thanks so much for joining us, and we appreciate your perspective.
Thank you for having me on.
No problem. House Republicans now calling on President Trump to declassify the FISA documents on Carter Page. Our next guest says those pages confirm what he's been saying for the past year. Andy McCarthy, he's here live for you, coming up next.
Good morning to you and welcome back. We have some quick headlines now. The suspect in a deadly supermarket standoff expected to be charged with murder today. Gene Atkins allegedly shot his grandmother during an argument and kidnapped his girlfriend before leading police on a chase and crashing outside of a Trader Joe's in Los Angeles. The store's manager was shot dead during a 3-hour standoff inside. Her family identifying her as Melita Corrado. A frightening moment as a woman is impaled by a beach umbrella. Air medics rushing her away from the sand in Ocean City, Maryland. A city spokesperson says a gust of wind lifted the umbrella off the ground, sending it through the woman's chest. Her condition is not known. They say she was conscious when first responders got to her. Last week, a woman in New Jersey was also impaled by a beach umbrella, the wind causing it to pierce her ankle. Frightening scene. Let's look at your headlines. Ainsley?
That sounds painful. Hope she's okay. Well, we have been telling you about the DOJ releasing more than 400 pages of the Carter Page FISA warrant application, and our next guest says they confirm exactly what he's been saying for the past year.
Here to explain, Fox News contributor and former federal prosecutor. He knows his way around a courtroom, Andrew McCarthy. Andy, good morning to you.
Good
morning.
What's your headline?
I think that a FISA warrant was issued on the basis of unverified, uncorroborated information.
How often does that happen?
You hope never, but you know, one of the big problems that I think people are going to have with this is that there's a lot of things in national security where the government has to be able to look you in the eye and say, trust us. FISA is exactly that, because you never get disclosure of it. And what people are going to wonder is, if they did that in this case, how rampant is the problem? How much do they push the envelope because they know no one's ever going to check their work?
Right. Yeah, FBI, DOJ, they used that dirty dossier, as the president called it this weekend in a tweet, as a reason to say that Carter Page might be collaborating with Russia. That clearly didn't happen, and if it did, Carter Page would have been arrested, right?
Yeah, Ainsley, the other thing I mean, we should be blunt about this. They used it to say the Trump campaign was colluding with Russia. What they say in the application is that he was basically the linchpin for coordinating the efforts that Russia was making to interfere with the election with the Trump campaign. And it's probably important to point out to people that under American FISA law, to get a warrant on an American citizen, you have to show not only that he's willfully engaged in clandestine activities, but they probably violate federal criminal law. They were up on Carter Page for about a year. He's never been charged with anything, which again I think underscores that they did this based on the dossier without corroboration.
And the reason you need to do that is because, unlike a standard criminal procedure where there's a defense attorney who can represent the defendant, the nature of surveillance requires that these things be in secret, so the defendant doesn't get a robust defense like is the hallmark of the U.S. judicial system.
Yeah, Todd, this is the big problem with this. Because this is a secret proceeding, the Justice Department and the court owe an American citizen who's subject to a surveillance warrant a higher level of due process, because it's the only due process the person is ever going to get.
Right, sure.
You know, they have to comply with the law on the Justice Department side, and the court has to be exacting to make sure that the Justice Department complies, and that appears to have broken down.
But with that in mind, Andy, this weekend you made some headlines that raised some eyebrows by saying we may need to look into the judges that were signing off on these FISA warrants. As we know, FISA judges are at the tippy top of their profession. These are federal judges with lifetime appointments who are asked to come on and take a look at these applications in very specific situations. That is a bold statement by you. You think this is warranted in this situation?
Well, I don't know how bold it is. Look, everybody gets stuff wrong, right? And I prefaced my remark about the judges by saying that I got this wrong. I told people that the FBI would never, ever do this, that they'd never bring unverified information to a court, especially when their procedures say they can't.
Sure.
I analyzed it wrong. The judges obviously relied overly, it appears, on the FBI. They trusted that they were following their procedures and they weren't exacting enough. I wasn't saying that the judges should be kicked off the bench, but I think they ought to be asked hard questions. I mean, to me, I look at this application and it's appalling.
Right. Yeah,
and I don't understand how a judge would... I think if I gave this warrant when I was a prosecutor to a judge down the street in Manhattan, I'd have got my head cut off.
Andy, here are the 412 pages of the heavily redacted FISA warrant. And look at this. I mean, you can see
a waste of paper on those blacked out pages.
I'm thinking maybe the court just weighed it instead of reading it.
Heavy. There are 13 Republicans, including Devin Nunes and Congressman Trey Gowdy, who are asking for the unredacted version. They want to see what all these pages actually say. Will they get that?
They'll get more than we'll get. And that's probably right, because a lot of what's in these FISA applications, look, they should be classified because there's the very top secret information. If there's information in there about what we know about Russia and the threat it is to the United States, that stuff should be kept classified. So the people in Congress who have clearance to review this should review it. How much of it becomes public, I don't know. But if they're going to argue that those redactions have some corroboration that nobody, including apparently the top people in the FBI, know about, let's see what they got.
Well, so far, I mean, Congress has been having committee hearings for over the last year, and yet it wasn't Congress, a congressional request that got those. It was Judicial Watch, a Freedom of Information Act request. So they coughed it up for Judicial Watch. Why is Congress having so much trouble getting the stuff they want to see?
Well, the problem is Congress wrangles with the Justice Department, right? And neither one of them wants to pull the trigger constitutionally with their powers against the other one, whereas Judicial Watch, which is really dogged in these sort of things, they get to go to a federal judge, and a federal judge isn't so worried about that and doesn't have any hesitancy about telling the government to produce documents.
So I'm sure you've seen the many tweets the president has already tweeted out 4 times.
Yeah, I heard about it.
What do you think about his assessment of what was discovered in this FISA application and the renewals?
I would respectfully suggest that the president ought to let this sing for itself because it's really bad. On the other hand, the president's gotten pretty far without my advice, so maybe I ought to leave it at that.
All right.
Fascinating stuff.
All right, Andy. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
See you. All right. Still ahead, more on the breaking news out of Canada, a deadly mass shooting in one of Toronto's most popular neighborhoods overnight.
Is it from that car?
Oh my goodness, the new details coming in overnight, straight ahead.
Wow, and President Trump sending a warning to Iran's president, quote, threatening the U.S. and you will suffer. We'll ask White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders about that when she joins us live next.
With Advil Liquid Gels, you'll ask, what bad shoulder? What headache? Advil is relief that's fast, strength that lasts. You'll ask, what pain? With Advil Liquid Gels.
Some believe if it's not German, it's not luxury performance. So we brought these Infiniti SUVs to Germany with American families to drive them.
This truck is only for German luxury auto, not for family or SUV.
VC Turbo. It's like 2 engines in one. How did Germany not do that first?
The Infiniti family of SUVs. There's nothing traditional about it. Lease the Infiniti QX50 for $399 a month at the Start Your Own Legacy Summer Sales Event. Infiniti. Empower the drive.
This is an overwash operation.
What's the protocol?
Our team are no longer employees of the U.S. government. Their identities have been erased. They are engaged in a higher form of patriotism.
The mission is first, last, and everything in between.
Mile 22, August 17th.
Attention, this is a legal alert. Certain manufacturers of surgical mesh have issued recalls due to high rates of mesh failures and complications. If you've received a mesh patch during hernia repair surgery and experienced serious complications or required revision surgery, call us right now. You may be entitled to substantial financial compensation. Call 1-800-800-1155. We are Parker Wakeman and we can help. 1-800-800-1155. Call us right now.
It felt great not having hepatitis C. It's like a load off my shoulders. I was just excited for it to be over.
Harvoni is a revolutionary treatment for the most common type of chronic hepatitis C. It's been prescribed to more than 250,000 people and is proven to cure up to 99% of patients who've had no prior treatment with 12 weeks. Certain patients can be cured with just 8 weeks of Harvoni. Before starting Harvoni, your doctor will test to see if you've ever had hepatitis B, which may flare up and cause serious liver problems during and after Harvoni treatment. Tell your doctor if you've ever had hepatitis B, a liver transplant, other liver or kidney problems, HIV, or any other medical conditions, and about all the medicines you take, including herbal supplements. Taking amiodarone with Harvoni can cause a serious slowing of your heart rate. Common side effects of Harvoni include tiredness, headache, and weakness.
Ready to let go of Hep C?
Ask your Hep C specialist about Harvoni.
You cannot mobilize the Iranian nation against Iran's security. You are making a mistake. You have clearly shown your opposition against the Iranian nation. Do not play with the lion's tail, or else you will regret it. It will bring you eternal regret.
Okay, so that is the president of Iran, Rouhani, talking to diplomats yesterday, where essentially he was laying down the law, don't threaten us, United States. And then the president of the United States, Donald Trump, he went on Twitter, and he doesn't do this very often. He was in all caps, which means he was yelling back at Iran, and he said this.
Right. This was his tweet to the Iranian president. Never, ever threaten the United States again, or you will suffer consequences, the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. We are no longer a country that will stand for your demented words of violence and death. Be cautious! Exclamation point.
That's right. Also yesterday, Mike Pompeo was referring to the Iranian leaders, and he said essentially they operate like the mafia. You know, they're sowing discord throughout the Middle East. They're responsible for a lot of corruption and a lot of violence. Mike Pompeo told the audience at the Ronald Reagan Center out in California that the United States is with the protesters. Keep in mind, there's great unrest inside of Iran because of the sanctions and the fact that we pulled out, and since January, their monetary system has tanked. Whatever it was, if it was 100% in January, it's 50% right now.
And a large part of that is because of a 180 from one administration to another. Instead of coming at with pallets of cash to from the Obama administration, obviously President Trump doing the exact 180 and saying, look, we're going to slap severe economic sanctions on you. They're going to put pressure on you to change your ways. There's a new sheriff in town, and that tweet, obviously in all caps, is one further piece of evidence that he is not messing around with this state sponsor of terror.
That's right. President Obama was giving him money, was supporting the Iran nuclear deal.
Right.
This new president, President Trump, has said absolutely not, and said at the beginning of the year he wants to withdraw from that.
Exactly right. One other thing that Mike Pompeo said was that the supreme leader of Iran had a $95 billion slush fund, a hedge fund that he uses to finance the Revolutionary Guard. Let's bring in from the White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. Sarah, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so what's going on with the president and Iran?
Look, the president's been clear from the beginning, since the first day he took office, and even before, that nuclear proliferation was something that he was not going to tolerate, something he would aggressively stand up and talk about. And he's certainly not going to listen to aggressive leaders from other countries and their empty threats against America. And he's going to stand up and make sure that we're protecting Americans and certainly protect the world from nuclear proliferation. It's something he takes seriously, and he's going to continue to be tough on this topic.
Sarah, what kind of a threat from Iran would allow our president to respond, and what kind of a response would that be?
Well, as you know, we're never going to broadcast what actions the president may or may not take, or what specific actions is going to prompt him to take things a step further. But you can be rest assured he takes this process extremely seriously. He's monitoring and watching the actions of Iran, and if needed, he will take what steps are necessary to protect people in this country, and certainly to protect the world from nuclear proliferation.
Sarah, we've been on the couch the entire morning, so we have not necessarily seen this because we're not watching other media. But you can be sure mainstream media is going to attack the president for his all-caps tweet saying he's inciting a problem with Iran. What's the president's response to that?
The only person that is inciting anything is Iran. The president has been very, very clear, again, since day one, what his objectives are, and he's certainly not going to tolerate the leader of Iran making threats against Americans, making threats against this country, making threats against Israel. This is a president who is going to stand up and make sure he is doing what is necessary. He's showing peace through strength, but if needed and steps are required, this president is not afraid to take them.
You know what? Sarah, this is somewhat reminiscent of last August when the president was going back and forth with Kim Jong-un, calling him Little Rocket Man, and Kim Jong-un was saying some derogatory things as well. But then eventually the president talked about fire and fury. You better look out, or fire and fury coming your way, which ultimately led to direct talks with Kim Jong-un. Is that part of the game? Is that part of the equation? Maybe this tough talk will lead to some sort of agreement?
Look, the president certainly uses tough language, but he's also not afraid to take tough steps if necessary. Thankfully, it didn't come to that with North Korea. Hopefully it doesn't come to that with Iran or anyone else. This is a president who wants to see peace. This is a president who wants to work with other world leaders. This is a president who wants to bring people together, but at the same time, he is going to do what is necessary to protect Americans and to make sure that he's laid that out very clearly. I don't think there's any question what Donald Trump's idea is here is that he's going to do whatever is necessary to protect Americans.
Sarah, let's talk about the FISA warrant application. Congress has been asking for this. Republicans in Congress have been asking for the unredacted form. Well, Judicial Watch, through Freedom of Information Act, they got this, and it's 412 pages. If you start flipping through it, you can see all the redactions. Well, Congress sent a letter. You have 13 Republicans in Congress, led by Devin Nunes. Trey Gowdy was part of this. And they sent a letter on June 14th to the president saying, can you please get the unredacted FISA application? We want to see what it all says. And they have the ability to do that. We as Americans can't, but they have confidentiality status where they're able to look at it all. Do you think the president's going to get involved? Will he demand from the DOJ, look, you need to hand this over to Congress?
Look, the president wants transparency in this process. I think what you can see even just from the information that has been released is that the president's been right all along, that this is a total waste of time and certainly a waste of taxpayer money. His campaign had nothing to do with Russia, but had everything to do with a great message to defeat Hillary Clinton. And that's exactly what that campaign was focused on, and that's exactly what this president has done since he got into office. And I think we'd all be a lot better off if we could get this out of the way, and that Congress and the special counsel could come to the same conclusion that the rest of America has, that this is a hoax and a waste of time, and let's move on and focus on some of the big problems and big challenges we actually have to face as a country.
Well, has he not asked for it because he just doesn't want to get involved?
Look, that remains to be seen, but the president would like this to operate independent of him, but he certainly has asked for the Department of Justice to be transparent in this process. And if there are questions, which clearly there remain to be some, we hope that they'll step up and help answer those questions.
Want to get to something that's right up my sleeve, because I'm the one that Fox and Friends sends out to do the stories on Made in America products. The White House is going to show off Made in America products at the White House today. This is a great thing that you guys do.
It's an incredible event. Hopefully the weather will get a little more cooperative throughout the day, because I know there's some big products that will be out on the South Lawn later this afternoon. But it's a great moment for our country. You get to see some of the greatest products that the world has to offer that are made right here in America. It's another reminder of the president's focus on American workers, the American economy, and creating American jobs. And this is going to be a great event and a great showcase. It's something we did last year, and we're really excited about seeing all the great products from all 50 states again here this year.
That's right. I just got an email from my friend Tim Tyler, who works for Viking Range. They build them down in Mississippi. They said they're going to have a Viking range there. Do you imagine the president's going to get a lot of feedback regarding the tariffs and trade talk?
Look, again, the president has been extremely focused on making sure we're doing everything to protect American workers and to grow American industry. And this event is exactly another reminder of that focus of the president. I don't think that will be the big topic of conversation. I think the fact that the economy is booming and growing like never before, that we have a better job market and job environment that we've had in decades, I think that'll certainly be something you hear talked a lot about. And maybe, just maybe, we could put that Viking range to use, Steve. I know you got a new cookbook. If you get some free time, maybe you can pop down here this afternoon and we can make some pie or some other
she loves making a pie.
Out of your book.
Pie is what she
I was going to say, Steve, that's a good contact to have. Can you give us all his number?
Okay.
Viking's a great company.
All right. Well, Sarah, good luck with the activity this afternoon. I hope the rain holds off.
Thanks so much. Have a great day, guys.
You too.
You bet.
Still ahead, more on that deadly mass shooting in one of Toronto's most popular neighborhoods.
Is it from that car?
And there is new information breaking right now. We'll have it for you next.
Plus, James Comey urged Americans to vote Democrat to protect our country's values. But now he says Democrats are losing their minds. We'll explain what he said coming up.
And this woman says her father never let her get away with self-pity, and it made her stronger and more confident as an individual. Her message for parents everywhere coming up.
Gonna watch you grow, gonna paint a sign, so you'll always know, as long as 1 and 1 is 2.
Good Monday morning to you. Back with some headlines. A 13-year-old girl saves herself and her baby sister from a carjacker by beating him up. This video shows Jocelyn Milam with her sister in the back seat of that white car while her mom is in a gas station near Salt Lake City. A man gets in and takes off. Jocelyn quickly springs into action.
I was hitting him as hard as I could. I was hitting him in the side of the head, on the neck, and the face. I told him that I didn't care if he kept me, just take my baby sister back.
The suspect then pulling over and running away. Police are still looking for him. The girls, thankfully, are not hurt. He urged Americans to vote Democrat to protect the country's values. But now, fired FBI Director James Comey is taking aim at the latest Democratic movement, tweeting, quote, "Democrats, please, please don't lose your minds and rush to the socialist left. This president and his Republican Party are counting on you to do exactly that. America's great middle wants sensible, balanced, ethical leadership." Nancy Pelosi says she has a way to stop Russian President Vladimir Putin from visiting D.C. She just needs signatures. An email from Pelosi sent to Democratic voters through the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee says, quote, "I will not allow Putin to set foot in the United States. I need 1,000 signatures to block his visit and keep our election safe." As it turns out, though, no number of signatures will actually block Putin's potential visit. That's a look at your headlines. Steve, I'll send it to you.
Whoops-a-daisy. All right. Thank you very much, Jillian. Fox News Alert. We have just learned 2 people are dead and 12 others hurt after that gunman opened fire on a busy street overnight in Toronto.
Police say this was not a random act, and they are not ruling out terrorism.
Rob Schmidt joins us live from our New York newsroom with the breaking developments. Rob.
Guys, good morning. 14 people shot, 2 of them killed after a gunman opened fire Sunday night on a popular street in Toronto's Greektown neighborhood, and police say this was not random.
Is it from that car?
Just horrifying to see that video there. The surveillance video showing the gunman in all black firing with a handgun at anybody he could find as he walked down busy Danforth Avenue that's lined with restaurants and shops on Toronto's Near East Side. Police say a young woman was shot and killed, and a little girl, 8 or 9 years old, was said to be in critical condition earlier this morning. We are not sure at this time if she is the second person who has now been pronounced dead.
I heard at least 20 shots in intervals. You know, clip being spent, reloading, clip being spent. I saw at least 4 people shot here by the fountain.
I thought it was fireworks at first because it was a rapid fire. More people were running, and so we started running and we ran down a side street.
It's terrible. It's a busy area. A lot of families out having dinner last night in that area of Toronto. The gunman was killed after a shootout with police. Police still have not released his name. Investigators now working to determine a motive. They say terrorism is certainly a possibility. We'll probably learn a lot more later today, guys. We'll send it back to you.
All right.
Chilling video.
Rob, with the very latest, 2 now, the death toll.
I know.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Well, Hillary Clinton has a solution to get illegal immigrants into America.
We need to get vouchers and discounted tickets to bring these families back together across that 1,000 miles.
Your emails on that just ahead.
And this woman says her father never let her get away with self-pity, and it made her stronger, a more confident person. Her message for dads everywhere coming up.
I thought I knew love until you came into this world.
In a new Wall Street Journal op-ed titled "Masculine Dads Raise Confident Daughters," our next guest argues that it was her father's unapologetic masculinity that gave her grit.
Wall Street Journal writer Abigail Schreier writing, quote, "My father never let me get away with self-pity, never allowed me to win an argument with tears." Abigail Schreier joins us now to talk about her dad and the importance of having a strong father figure. Good morning to you, Abby.
Great to see you.
Good to see you too. So what made you want to write this op-ed?
Well, I wrote it essentially because for the last 7 to 8 months, we've been engaging in a national conversation about men mistreating women, men behaving very badly towards women. And that conversation is focused on 2 things. The first is holding men accountable for their bad behavior. And the second is so-called toxic masculinity, how to raise boys so that they become essentially emasculated feminists. The problem with this is that it spectacularly omits women's agency. How do we raise girls so that they demand better treatment from the men in their lives? How do we raise girls so they expect more of themselves and refuse to be mistreated?
Abigail, you write in your op-ed, if you want to protect girls, find them good parents or become them. Dads, whatever you're doing for your daughter, double it. When you were growing up, did you have the same appreciation for your father then as you do now?
I think I did. I mean, my father and I were always very, very close. We always have been. But, you know, it's interesting. I didn't mean to downplay the role of mothers, of course. I mean, I am one. But it's not that mothers don't have a very important role with all their children. I mean, it's incalculably large. But the point here is that men have fathers, in my case and in many cases, have a uniquely potent message when they teach their daughters to demand a lot from themselves and to expect a lot in terms of the way they will be treated. And my father certainly taught me that.
That's wonderful. You are so blessed to have that. I love the story about Borders Books. Tell the audience real quickly about that story.
Well, I was sitting in Borders Books with my father one Saturday night after I graduated from college, and we were listening to sort of, you know, somebody singing and playing guitar from the floor above. And I teased my dad, who was in the middle of reading. I teased him. I said, if you had given me more support and encouragement with the guitar, that could be me right now. And he said, and he looked at me. He said, "That's right. I didn't support it. That's why my kid's on her way to graduate school, and that guy's playing in a Borders."
Funny stuff. Read all about it in the Wall Street Journal. Abigail Schreier, thank you very much for joining us live.
Thanks, Abigail. More Fox and Friends.
Thank you.
You're welcome. More Fox and Friends on the other side of the break.